Chicago Cubs had an off day yesterday as they prepare to take on none other than the Baltimore Orioles in Baltimore. As they prepare for this three-game set, we are two series away from the All-Star break, as well as the Chicago Cubs getting a much-needed break. But for Jed Hoyer, he has a lot of huge decisions coming up, including should he trade for this pitcher that I think could thrive underneath the Chicago Cubs. We'll talk about that as well as a returning Jameson Tyone right after this. Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of Chicago Cubs Central, your number one spot for all things Chicago Cubs. I'm your host, Mike Jones. Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode. Hey, do me a favor, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe so that you never miss any of the action right here on Chicago Cubs Central. Guys, listen, as the trade deadline nears, we are going to be talking, evaluating different trades that the Chicago Cubs can make. Also, do not miss next week. Next week is special guest week right here on Chicago Cubs Central. I'm calling in reinforcements. We've got a special guest next week looking at the first half of the Chicago Cubs season, talking about exactly what they did right, what they did wrong, and how can they correct it in the amount of a playoff push. That's right. After All-Star break, we kick things into high gear, baby. It's all about the trade deadline and then trying to see who can make it to the postseason. The Chicago Cubs are in a dogfight to try to see if they can reclaim the Central Division and see if they could potentially host a playoff series. So we'll see what happens with that. But we move on from there and we talk about the Chicago Cubs simply just need to get healthy. One of those things they need to get healthy. They need Eric Cabrera back, but they also need this gentleman back. That's right, Jameson Tyone. Jameson Tyone was sent on a rehab assignment with the High A South Bend Cubs on Sunday. This marked his first career start since suffering that hamstring strain. The veteran took the mound on Sunday afternoon against the Beloit Sky Carp and looked solid in his first start back. He allowed one run across 3 1/3 innings pitched for 4 hits and 2 strikeouts in the contest. Tyone had to shake off some rust early as he loaded the bases with one out in the first inning. After striking out the first batter of the game, the Cubs right-hander then proceeded to allow 3 straight singles. However, Tyone got out of it fairly unscathed, got a fly out that brought in a run and induced a weak pop-up to the shortstop to end the bottom of the first inning. After that traffic-filled first inning, Tyone really settled down over the next few innings. The veteran set down 7 of his next 8 batters he faced before departing with 1 out in the top of the 4th inning. Overall, this was a nice first start back for Tyone. He returned on the mound after a month-long absence and most importantly came out of Sunday's rehab outing fully healthy. It remains to be seen what the Cubs plan to do with Tyone following this start. They could activate him from the injured list this week or send him on another rehab start down in the minors. Tyone only built up to 45 pitches in his first rehab outing with the South Bend Cubs, so the right-hander would only go about 4 innings in the Cubs if the Cubs wanted his next start to be in the big leagues. Therefore, it could make more sense for the 34-year-old to start another game in the minors as he builds up his pitch count. The team could remove his rehab assignment to AAA and have him be fully ready to go when the second half of the season begins July 17th. Again, Jameson Tyone's 2026 hasn't gone according to plan. He spent the last few weeks on the injured list with the hamstring strain, and he has a 5.19 ERA across 67 2/3 innings pitched this season. Getting him back, though, does put less stress on other pitchers in the Cubs' rotation. So getting Jameson Tyone back is a big piece of what the Chicago Cubs want and desire in order to be competitive. Jameson Tyone also has to pitch better. Point blank, period. You cannot be giving up all those home runs. Jameson Tyone has been a home run bandit all season long. And we have to figure out how to get him back healthy, get him back right without the home run ball being a big, huge part of that. So, yeah, Jameson Tyone does look like he is getting ready to come back. The Chicago Cubs need to make sure that he is right, though. So, what would you do? Would you allow JMO to pitch another game in AAA Iowa, this time for AAA Iowa, and then allow him to be ready once the season starts back up on July 17th? Or do you brush him back in the second series this week, and potentially just have him pitch then? So that is what I want to know from you guys. One of the questions of the day. Give us your thoughts in the comments section on what you would do if it were up to you. Yeah, man, like I said, Jameson Tyone has to come back, has to be ready to play. And looking forward to the Chicago Cubs getting him back as soon as possible. The Chicago Cubs do start a 3-game set against none other than the Baltimore Orioles. That starts today at 5:35 p.m. Central Time. It'll be Matthew Boyd on the mound against Shane Baz. Matthew Boyd with a 3-1 record with a 5.08 ERA, and he's going up against Shane Baz, who is 4-8 with a 4.39 ERA. So yeah, man, Cubs on the road looking to do some damage and to win a baseball game in Baltimore. They also then will send out Colin Ray, who is 6-5 with a 4.74 ERA, and he's going up against Dean Kramer, who is 1-1 with a 3.8118, I'm sorry, ERA in that next game. And then last but not least, we will go ahead and see the Chicago Cubs send out Drew Peterson, who is 4-7 with a 6.75 ERA, and the Chicago Cubs will face left-hander Trevor Rogers, who is 6-7 with a 4.70 ERA. So opportunity for the Cubs there. Got to get Jameson Tyone back. He would, if we don't see him then we would definitely see him in the series against the Reds, which is a 3-game set, a Friday, Saturday, Sunday set. And then the Chicago Cubs are off for All-Star break until next Friday. So could potentially see him start things back after All-Star break, which Chicago Cubs should be getting healthy after All-Star break too. Should probably get Edward Cabrera back at post All-Star break. And then, like I said, move forward from there. So, like I said, a lot going on with the Chicago Cubs there. But one thing that we have to keep in mind and keep talking about is the potential for Chicago Cubs trades. There has been another one identified. This time it's José Soriano. José Soriano is a pitcher for the Los Angeles Angels. So if the Chicago Cubs are serious about making a deep postseason run in 2026, Jed Hoyer shouldn't just be looking for another innings eater at the trade deadline. I mean, we already got David Peterson. He should be targeting a pitcher with top of the rotation stuff who is under team control beyond this season. A pitcher like that is someone like José Soriano of the Los Angeles Angels. Soriano has continued his breakout 2026 campaign by establishing himself as one of the best power arms in baseball. Early in the season, he dominated hitters with a historic start, and even as the season has progressed, he has remained one of the American League's premier starters. His strikeout rate has jumped to nearly 30%. His whiff rate has climbed to almost 34%. And he continues to pair elite swing and miss ability with one of the highest ground ball rates in baseball. His underlying metrics, including xERA and xFIP, suggest his success is backed by legitimate improvement rather than luck, which is huge because, like I said, we know what Wrigley Field gives you in the summertime. So these things are ace level indicators. He's also just 27 years old and under club control beyond 2026, making him much more valuable than a typical rental. So you want to ask yourself, what makes Soriano so good? The first thing that jumps off the page is dude's velocity. Soriano routinely sits at 98 to 100 miles per hour with one of the hardest sinkers in Major League Baseball. That sinker generates weak contact and is an enormous number of ground balls, exactly the kind of profile that plays in October. What's his pitch mix? His pitch mix, he offers a sinker at 98 and 100 miles per hour, his primary weapon. Heavy movement that produces ground balls and broken bats. He also has a four-seam fastball that sits around 98 to 100 miles per hour, used to attack hitters up in the zone and change eye levels. He also boasts a knuckle curve that's in the mid-80s. His best swing and miss secondary pitch with a sharp vertical break. And then he also has a slider that's in the upper 80s. It gives him another put-away pitch against right-handed hitters. And then he has a splitter changeup that's used primarily against left-handed hitters to keep them off the fastball. So the biggest development in 2026 hasn't been the velocity. He's always had that. Now he's finally figured out the command. He's throwing more quality strikes, finishing hitters more efficiently, and finally turning elite stuff into elite production. This is what we want to see from Edward Cabrera, too. I'm tired of seeing his elite stuff and his velocity and his numbers. I want to see elite production from him. So MLB's own pitch analysis credits improvements in both his stuff and pitch sequencing for the spike in strikeouts and whiffs. Now, you ask yourself, why does this young man fit with the Cubs? So the Cubs already have a talented rotation, but every playoff team is searching for one more frontline arm. Imagine a postseason rotation built around Matthew Boyd, José Soriano, Ben Brown if he comes back, and then you can see potentially Edward Cabrera, maybe a Justin Steele start if he shows he's healthy, and maybe even Shota Imanaga. So these are all just pieces that you could absolutely see starting a game for the Chicago Cubs in the postseason. You mix that group together, and that's suddenly a group capable of matching up with almost anyone in the National League. Soriano also solves another issue. The Cubs have one of the better infield defenses in baseball. They got Nico Horner, Dansby Swanson, Michael Busch, Alex Bregman, and of course, Dansby Swanson. The Cubs, like I said, pairing one of baseball's best ground ball pitchers, one of baseball's strongest defensive infields is almost a perfect marriage. Wrigley Field can become homer friendly when the wind is blowing out, so ground balls don't leave the yard. That's another reason Soriano's profile makes so much sense for Chicago. But as we know, a pitcher of this caliber is not going to come free. So this is where things get complicated. Because Soriano isn't a rental, the Angels have very little incentive to move him unless they are overwhelmed with the offer. The asking price would likely begin with at least one premium prospect. A realistic framework could look like one of the Cubs' better young pitchers, maybe a Jackson Wiggins, another top 15 organizational prospect, maybe you're looking at a Jaguar, and then possibly a lower level lottery ticket player, somebody that you could potentially bet on to see maybe turn the corner for the Angels, who seem like they're in constant rebuild mode, or somebody that, like I said, that could come in and immediately contribute to the team. So in other words, expect a package similar to what teams pay for controllable frontline starters, not rentals. The Angels know they're going to give up years of control, and they'll demand a return that reflects that. So again, this isn't a trade that the Cubs need to make. It's a trade that could separate them from every other contender. José Soriano has frontline velocity. He misses bats. He generates elite ground ball rates. He's under team control. And at just 27 years old, he could anchor the Cubs' rotation along with Edward Cabrera well beyond 2026. If Jed Hoyer is looking for the move that changes the trajectory of the franchise, not just the season, but for the next several years, José Soriano should be at the very tippy top of the trade board for Jed. But I want to know you guys' thoughts. What are you guys' thoughts on José Soriano? Should the Cubs look to make this trade with the Angels? Give me your thoughts below. Make sure you guys like, share, and leave a comment. And like I said, I appreciate you guys so much. Go Cubs, go. Hopefully they beat the Orioles. We'll be back with another episode on tomorrow. Until then, go Cubs, go.
Thank you for watching another episode of Chicago Cubs Central, the #1 spot for all Chicago Cubs content. Remember to like, share, subscribe for more Cubs content.